I think success is an individual pursuit, but I think it cannot be done at the expense of others. It has to also be communal.
Mm.
Hard work, hard work, that's what they say. Hard work, I earn my pay. Hard work, do it every day.
Well, welcome once again to another Work Ethic podcast. And I am connected today with Sarah Page, which I am so excited to catch up with. She's an old friend, kind of at the like, let's say the LinkedIn profile. She's a graphic designer. She's a muralist, visual strategist, done a lot of work actually in for-profit and as well as nonprofit. I'm going to let you kind of jump in to flesh that out, but it's so good to see you. It's been way too long. I'm really glad that the podcast is giving me excuses to catch up with old friends. And so I'm really glad you set aside some time to do this with me today. But Sarah, why don't you just jump in and like introduce yourself a little better than that to everybody? Just kind of, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited that you have a podcast.
So am I. It's been so
I
fun.
feel like you should just say things more publicly all the time.
I'm trying, although I don't know that everyone would agree with you about that, but I'm doing my best, right?
Yeah, I think your introduction was pretty good. I would say that's the easiest way to understand what I do. I often introduce myself as a graphic designer and an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that encompasses. I'm a sole proprietor. I just officially established Sarah Page Art as an LLC business.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
In process. So I do anything and everything that creative, in the creative field. So mostly illustration and graphic design. And then I also paint, and the visual strategist stuff is a very specific piece of what I do, but yeah, just a general creative.
Which I will tell you okay. So for those listening, just real quick, we usually do this toward the end, but what's your Instagram handle?
At Sarah Page Art.
Okay,
SarahPageArt.
So all y'all need to go follow that. She's really good. I love I love having you in my feed at all. Like, it's like you're watching your kind of art journey. And I remember you kind of going like, all right, I'm gonna start getting more serious about this, and just watching it along the way. Like, so for many people don't know this, I've like tinkered with art my whole life. I've been like a natural artist that never does anything with art because
you're super artistic.
Do a bunch of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I have the ability, but I don't have like something like the commitment to keep it up. Like I'm in here in my office and I have piles of these old sketchbooks, and I wish I still had the discipline to do it. And I do have discipline. It's just I'm doing other things and maybe haven't made time for art, but I like live vicariously through watching you. I like some of the murals you've been doing. I'm like jealous. Like I wish I was doing those things sometimes, but I'm like just happy you're doing it. But yeah, y'all go follow her, Sarah Page Art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do this. You and I, it's been a long time. So I like want to hear all the things, right? But why don't let's try something. Do you remember how we met?
Oh, probably the lake house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a long time ago. Probably.
That was like 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah.
That was like 2011, 2012.
I
think it was 2011.
What do you remember? Do you remember anything specific?
Do you remember like the very first time ever?
Like, yeah, so coming to the lake house, or I'm just curious what is in your mind, what you remember.
I remember coming into the lake house. It was probably Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there was like
it was a home church.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a home church night, and it was a bunch of you crazy lake house people there. I think Ryan invited me.
Ortega?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because I met him at the hub.
Okay.
Because I was doing Hula for Happiness and working at the hub. So he invited me over for lake house night. And then I just remember the discussion being really good. And I remember there being a very diverse group of people there. Pretty sure Kim was there. Amara Latoya, I think, was
Yep.
there.
Yep.
Cliff was for sure there.
Mm-hmm.
So just a really unique, smart group of people. And I was like, man, I want to know them more. And fun. We had a lot
Yeah.
of fun too. I think we ate food and then
If it was a Wednesday night, we definitely ate food.
yeah, and had a rich. Oh, there was probably like a couple homeless people there too. So yeah, I mean, it was like a very. It was just very cool. It was a very cool night. I don't remember what we talked about, but
well, all good. A lot of times people have these vivid. So like, people will be like, no, I remember I came in your house and it was hot as hell and you fed us rabbit that you raised in the yard or something. You know what I mean? Like there are people that have like, they came on a particularly fun night or someone got stabbed or, it's like, there's these stories. So I'm always curious, like, what was it for you?
There was a night where Heather was doing, she was drawing blood from people at one point. She was like learning to be a phlebotomist.
I had a bruise for the longest time from that. Cause I was like, yeah, draw my blood. And I was like, you're not good at this.
I'm like, these people have needles in their arms, like for practice. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And you also had a booth from Chili's in the kitchen too.
I still have that actually. It's in it's not being utilized right now, but it's in a warehouse for the bike shop that I'm storing it because I'm like, how can you get rid of the old Chili's booth? Like it has a couple cracked tiles. I'm like, I'll fix those. That's fine. Just one day I'm gonna need that. Well, for those of you that are listening, like there's a couple references in there, and I kind of thought maybe that would be a helpful way for setting some context of even our story. Like, so the lake house, I've referenced before. I've had Will Barrett on, a couple other people, but it was a little intentional community, bunch of folks trying to be Christians that moved into a house together here in Tampa.
A ragtag bunch.
Pretty rough neighborhood, and yeah, it was a eclectic group of folks that we're trying really hard to live on very little and to love our neighbors and be hospitable. We ran what we called a house church out of there. So every Wednesday night we'd have over people for dinner and a Bible study that we would do, which was just a great place to build community. And you're right. So there were probably a few homeless folks there, pretty diverse group. And a lot of the work of the well grew out of that. Cause early days, like we'd have some homeless friends come over and be like, hey, there's nowhere to eat on Thursday. And that's how the banquet started. And, a lot of what the well is known for today really grew out of the potting soil or the compost heap that was the lake house.
I love that. The compost heap that was the lake house.
Yeah, which is really what it was, right? We're all part of the same compost heap, which is a Fight Club reference for some of you that may know that. But then you reference, I met Ryan at the hub. So the lake house is part of this network that I think we've had Brian Sanders on the show before, like some of you may have heard, but there's a network of little ministries or startup initiatives called the Underground here in Tampa that anyway, we were kind of loosely affiliated or part of this network. And so they ran that nonprofit had like a co-work space that a lot of us utilized a lot that they called the hub. Right. And so that would have been where you met Ryan and then you said, well, I was with Hula for Happiness at the time, which I thought, let's go there. Like, can you tell us about Hula for Happiness?
So I used to be a traveling hula hooper.
It's too good. It's too good. Sentence, by the way, I'm chopping out. That's going to be the preview to this episode. I was a traveling hula hooper. That's it.
Yeah. I used to internationally travel with my hula hoop. Yeah. So Hula for Happiness was my friend Carissa Caricato's dream. Oh, she's Carissa Williams now. It was her dream to start Hula for Happiness, and she wanted to make hula hoops to spread joy. That was really our mission, was to spread joy and the love of God, one hoop at a time, one life at a time. Still got the pitch.
Still got the rap down.
Yeah, so we got to, it was some of the coolest years of my life. We were, bye. we were making hula hoops, and we had travel hula hoops that we would make that would fold down so that they fit in your suitcase. And we could fit about 25 hula hoops in a large suitcase.
Do I remember right? Those were made out of like sprinkler material or like micro sprinkler material?
Irrigation tubing.
Yep.
Yeah. So we bought everything that we needed from the hardware store.
Yep.
And we would have these big hoop making workshops where people would come in and help us make them. And then we would partner with churches or ministries in the area to help fund the projects. And then we would travel with them. And we went to Haiti. I got to go to India and Costa Rica to do this. And it was just so cool. So we would go into orphanages there, or go to wherever the ministries were in those places and do dance programs with the kids. And then we would donate all the hoops to them. And what we found was that the hula hoop was this cool ice breaking tool where you could be in a place where you don't know anybody, and all of a sudden this wacky person's in the middle of the room hula hooping, and it kind of just broke down barriers like left and right. So we also did a hoop jam every Wednesday night at the park in Tampa, where we had a bunch of local people involved. So it was a ton of fun.
I still think about that. I didn't come to a lot of hula jams. In fact, I may have come to none. I
came to exactly zero.
Listen, I have this weird allergy to fun. So like I loved so do you ever some of you guys and Sarah, do you know the Stray Cats? You ever listen to Stray Cats? Like some of you may have heard the Stray Cats, but there's this song called the Stray Cat Strut, which almost everyone knows, but there's this line in the Stray Cat. So I used to be really into rockabilly. I love the Stray Cats. The Stray Cat Strut has this line in it that says, "I wish I could be that carefree and wild, but I got cat class and I got cat style," or whatever. And that line always
you?
like, I don't know, the class and style. There was something in me that I wish I could be that carefree and wild. Like I would watch you all. Like, look at how free they are. Look at how much fun they're having. And it's like same like anyone's like, let's dance. And I'm like, this is gonna be really hard for me. And
yeah, but you give someone a hula hoop and all of a sudden you're not dancing. You're like playing with this toy.
And it was magical. I remember watching you all, and I still think of it from time to time. So this last year with COVID, we had to stop doing the Conscious Party, which I'm hoping we can relaunch again in the near future.
Yeah.
For those listening, it was like an open mic potluck dinner, kind of an open source party. I still have old footage of you hula hooping at conscious parties.
Yeah, we probably did some glow hooping at conscious parties.
So they would light up. And now they've got hula hoops that when you spin them, they're like spelling words and stuff. They're doing like, they're really strange how that works. But we still, Claire will come in and she's still hula hooping all the time, like with her awesome. Light up hula hoops. And so I think about you guys a lot. Now there is no hula hoop for happiness anymore, or is that what?
Well, it kind of moved to Atlanta with Carissa, and she's not doing it quite as much anymore, but we do still have girls in India and in Brazil who have been taking the program on and doing it in their communities too. So that was another really cool piece of it, is it brought us people from all over the world. We had a girl, Francesca, from the island of Mauritius off the coast of Africa.
Wow.
Get in touch with Carissa through the website and just say like, I'm a hula hooper and I love what you guys are doing and I want to be involved. And then like Carissa ended up going to her wedding. You know, it's just like,
that's so cool.
It was so wild. And, you know, Yana from Prague, I think, she's from Prague, like just like, and Deepshika from India. I mean, all these girls were just brought to us, and it was really, really cool. I have to give Carissa, you know, all the credit. She's really I think it was really her DNA that was infused into the hula hoop. She's very much a free spirit. So
she makes me nervous the same way everyone dancing and hula hooping makes me nervous. Like she walks in a room and something in me like gets like, oh, what's about to happen? She is such a wild card, and her eyes are huge, and I'm like, it's it. But
now she's a mom. Now she's got babies.
So amazing. She'd be really good at that. Really good at that, I imagine. So I'm curious if you made any, so like, you know, so I want to ask you a bunch of questions about your work and your relationship with your work and things, and we'll get into all of that. But I am curious, kind of jumping ahead, just based on this, you went to Haiti, Costa Rica, India. I'm curious, just from some of my own travel and observations I've made traveling, like if you have any lessons or observations just from having like a small sampling of places around the world, and maybe in relation to work, like things you saw that inspired you in your own work, or that ways that people worked. So I'll
Hmm.
just give you an example for me. I I spent some time in El Salvador, and I remember being there, and there was a couple, like, well, a lot of stuff. There was just things that we take for granted, like, say, power tools that a lot of folks didn't have. And I would watch people cut through something with a handsaw. But the thing that sticks in my mind is I remember seeing four men on the side of a river loading a dump truck. So they have a dump truck and they have shovels, and they are loading a dump truck with shovels of sand from the side of the river, throwing sand up over the side of this dump truck. And I just thought, how on earth, like, can you know, just, and they would just be there working all day to fill this dump truck. And that kind of thing like stuck with me forever, right? Like
Mm.
anytime I want to complain about something, I remember these guys shoveling this dump truck. I didn't know the guys. I saw them across the river. It was just like, I never forget you guys, you know, and I'm just curious, like things you may have
Yeah.
seen, memories you may have. And if there isn't, that's cool. But I'm just wondering if you, anything stuck with you from those travels related to your own work.
Yeah, your story reminds me of when we were in India, we had to paint their like community hall area. And they were like, "Oh, you're an artist, you can paint." But it was just like you're just painting a room. So it wasn't like it required any major skill. But the materials that they had to paint with, I mean, the paintbrushes were just not like they would have never passed as like a paintbrush
This is not a
here.
paintbrush.
This is not a paintbrush. I don't know what this is. This is like
It's a
some
feather
hair.
duster. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like there was no structure to it. It was just like this mat of like hair on a stick, basically, that you're trying to get a smooth wall painted with this. Like this is impossible. And the paint itself was almost like
Mm.
it was almost like cement mix.
Mm-hmm.
That was had some pigment in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being frustrated by it and being like, how are we supposed to do this with this? And then being like, this is just how you do it. This is what you're given and this is how you have to make it work. And it was similar in Haiti. I painted that was one of my first murals. Oh my gosh.
Really? There we go. See, here we go. Tell us.
I like never made this connection before. Yeah, we were at a girl's house, and she wanted a mural painted on her bedroom. I don't even remember what it was. Honestly, I don't remember. It was some words. It was some words.
Words I don't know what they mean. Is that like it's Creole? I put a C and an R.
Yeah, I feel like it was something with like butterflies or I don't know. She was a young girl, so we painted on there before. And I just remember thinking like, gosh, this could be so much better if I had the right supplies and feeling that like perfectionism rise up in me, but then also having to realize like this is just in the moment, this is what you have to do. So so yeah, there was a couple pieces like that. And also the woman that we stayed with in India worked at she was a seamstress and she hired other women to help her. And she had to walk to work every day and cross this road. And I don't, if you're listening, if you've ever been to India, like crossing even a dirt road is like taking your life in your own hands because like there's no stopping for pedestrians over there.
There's
like,
some wonderful videos of this on YouTube, by the way. Just like look traffic, India. They're amazing.
We walked to work with her and like I was nervous. Like I had anxiety just anticipating having to cross this dirt road to get to her building. So obviously I survived it, but
it's too good.
Yeah.
It's funny. I wonder if I just had this idea as you were talking about painting in these different places, like having bad materials. You may hate this idea. This may actually be a terrible idea. But I just thought if you ever had a wall locally that you were like, I want to do a tribute to some of these people I've met around the globe. And I'm going to paint it I'm going to be like, where can I get that really shitty paintbrush? Where can I get that like pigment cement or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, let me order it from India and get that sent over from Haiti and like do a project. Be like, I'm going to do my best stab at like, when did work become a thing that you were cognitively aware of?
That's a good question. I remember like one of my first jobs,
okay.
But the idea of work, the first memory that comes to mind is my dad working.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a used car salesman for a while, and he would get home late. And I remember I would always greet him at the door and say, "Did you sell any cars today?"
I
which
love
was
it.
which he was probably like knew that I was
Not
going to ask that question.
Yeah, just
Yeah, and my mom always worked too, so I had two working parents. But it was always just kind of how it was. So yeah, work was always a thing that I knew that I would have to do one day. But I don't know that was probably my first memory though.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, hold on, because when you started that, and by the way, not everyone can probably see you. You did one of my first jobs, and she did but what did you, because you went from that to dad was working used car salesman. Did you say what that was?
No, I didn't tell you
Okay,
what my first
good.
job was.
I was like, wait, I missed it. All right, go.
Yes, I can tell you that now. Okay,
Okay.
so I lived in a neighborhood that had a bunch of kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so me and my neighborhood friend we were always like scheming of ways to make money off of the other kids in our neighborhood.
I love it.
So,
I love it. Little hustlers.
So another glimpse of my early artistic talent was we would draw tattoos onto people. So I specifically remember drawing a lizard on this little boy's arm, with Crayola markers, and then charging him $1 for it. And it was also the first time that I felt shame about asking for too much money. Like I remember thinking that was too much for that. I should have only asked for 50 cents. It probably was only worth 50 cents. And we definitely had a lemonade stand too, but I remember specifically drawing tattoos and people being like, yeah.
Were you always pretty like entrepreneurial? Like, so lemonade stand, I'm selling Crayola drawings on this kid's arm. Like,
I was always the number two. There was always somebody that was the initiator, but I was always the like, yeah, let's do it. So I was always on board, but I was never the first person to kind of drive a bus, which has been a theme throughout my life.
I kind of remember you and Carissa that way, right? Carissa with Hula for Happiness. You're like, I'm on board. And then you made a lot of it happen. Like, oh, that's what we're doing. Let's go. Like, yeah, you are good at that. Actually,
there's the analogy of like the first person dancing.
Mm-hmm.
I think Brian's probably shared this before, but you have the one person that's dancing in the middle of a crowd.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, that person's just crazy.
Yeah.
And that was Carissa. She was just crazy.
And everyone knew she was crazy, by the way. Love you, Carissa. But
yeah, Carissa, you'll have to listen to this. Yeah. But then when the second person starts dancing, now it's like, oh, it's a thing. Now it's people are dancing. So I was always willing to be the second person dancing, but I wasn't always willing to be the first person dancing. Yeah.
Man, that's good. So, okay, you said that was the first time I felt shame on what I was charging. Talk to me about that, because it implies there's more times.
Oh, yeah.
It implies there's some kind of dynamic here. Talk to me about this. Like, so making art and charging for it. And by the way, being someone who has, so my experience selling art, so I sold myself a lot. And I say that way on purpose. It felt a lot like prostitution to me. Like, not that I know what it's like to be a prostitute, but art prostitution was like, I'll get 20, because I worked for others, right? You get 25% of your work and you don't get paid anything if you don't sell anything. Like, that was what it was like being a caricature artist at Busch Gardens for a while. I did that, did photography. And then I also, when I tried to go on my own, I often didn't get paid for work I did, and I didn't know what to do. Like, it took me some time to grow up and realize like how to fight with people and demand pay, and then kind of feeling like, well, maybe I'm not worth paying or whatever. But talk to me about this, like shame and charging and art. Like, tell me about that.
Art is tricky because it's so subjective. Like, the value of art is so subjective. And I deal in lots of different mediums of art. So how I feel about charging for a painting versus a brochure design versus a mural is all going to be different and relative to what somebody's willing to pay for those things. And also the value that I see in it as the artist creating it, you know? So there could be times when I'm like, I didn't really put that much effort into that. Like, I don't think I should charge that much, but somebody else may look at it and go, no, this is worth a ton. So I've learned that like the graphic design stuff has been a little bit easier to charge for because people just recognize that that stuff costs money, although people still want it for free, you know? Like, it's one of those, like, I feel like the creative world gets that a lot, where you're not going to ask the plumber to come fix your toilet for free.
Right.
But if your buddy knows how to make a logo,
Make me
you're
a
like,
logo.
hey, make me a logo. Cool, you can design this t-shirt. So I always appreciate my friends who come to me and say, I want to pay you for this.
Yep.
So, because that's very affirming. And I also try to hook them up too. You know, it's like, I'm not going to charge them what I would just charge some stranger off the street too. And I've learned too that relationships really play into what I'm willing to charge for things and what I'm willing to work a little bit less for, and the shame or whatever I feel around that. So it kind of varies. It just all depends. I think where I still struggle is with more fine art stuff, is figuring out what to charge for like a painting. So that's probably why I haven't actually done much of that, because I'm just like, I don't know, that's scary over there. I don't want to figure it out.
Now,
and there's one more thing. There's one more thing about that, is that I also feel like art should not be that expensive. Like, which is probably the wrong thing to say coming from an artist. Like, I don't agree with the fact that this painting is $500, but that's what people are charging for. But I think it's not fair. So I am my worst enemy.
Yeah, because if we're talking about a painting, I kind of think $500 is a very cheap painting. Personally, like, I don't know what painting we're talking about, but I'm like, that's a low number actually for a painting. And I don't know what metrics you use, like, for, like, this is the problem, right? Like, what's fine artwork? So there's like concept, execution, material cost is not huge, right? It's capacity to develop those things.
I think that's why I like public art, because I want art to be accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
So I want the people who have the money to pay for it. So like, get the corporations and the businesses out here, get them paying for the art, and then make it accessible for everyone to be able to appreciate. And that's where fine art kind of misses the mark, is it's only accessible to the people who can afford it.
That's right. That's right. No, I actually, man, there's probably some really good lesson behind that. 'Cause you're right. It's like public art becomes easily accessible. The homeless guy can sit and enjoy the mural that you did on the building that he lives next to. Right. And it's like, yeah, you could get paid, like, you get paid well for doing a mural. Right. I mean, I had a muralist buddy, he's from Birmingham, just visit the other day. And I mean, he's getting offered, I mean, I don't know what's normal, but he's like getting calls constantly. Like, hey, we'll give you $12,000 to do this wall, $10,000 to do that. And he actually, it's funny because he, anyway, we don't need to get off on his story, but he's finally made it in town as like a known muralist. It's getting calls all the time. And he's like, I'm going to leave town now. Like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. It went from like, I love making art and I'm getting paid for it, to like, now people just want me to paint on everything in town. And so I'm going to go move out in the woods for a while. I was like, that's interesting.
I need to talk to this person.
Yeah, he could send you some work for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want it anymore. He's passing it on to other people. And
that's really interesting.
It is, but I think it's a little more of like a soul searching. Like, it is not a vocational decision. Like, it's not like there's another job he's going to go get. He's like, I don't think I want to do this for a while. Which happens, I think. But like it's interesting because you're right. Fine art is very exclusive. Now, have you done much commissioned fine art, or I do a painting, and if you like the painting, you can buy the painting?
Yeah. Most of my commissions come in the form of graphic design.
That's right.
Yeah. I've done a couple fine art commissions, but I also hate those. I don't like doing those. I would rather, like, if it's because it's usually friends coming to me, and I would rather just give it to them for free. I don't,
So
it's my own thing, but I kind of feel like you can't afford what this is going to cost.
that's right.
So I would rather just give it to you.
Let's not insult me with a number here. I'm just going to give it to you. Trust me. You don't want to pay me for this. But like, so I actually have, it's funny. I have a buddy that came to me recently and said, I want you to do this portrait of a family member for me. And I can do that. Like, I'm capable, but I'm like, literally, I'm like, well, I don't have any of the materials. I'll have to go buy them. I have to set aside. And then and I told him then, I was like, here's what keeps happening. For those of you listening that want to call me and ask me for something, this is what keeps happening. And it's not just art, it's like life. Like, I want to be valuable to the people in my life. And so they say, hey, can you help me tile my shower? Can you help me? Can you make this drawing for me? Can you help me come up with this, whatever it is? And I'm like, yeah. I want to help. And then time passes and I kick myself and I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth to do all these things.
Yeah.
And I need to say no. I should have said no. And so when this person came to me and I just told him, I was like, I want to say yes. I want to do this for you. But let me tell you about 2 other things I wanted to do that they fell through the cracks because I said yes to too many things. And I actually have a pretty full plate. And he's like, well, I want to pay you for it. And I was like, actually that changes things. Cause like, I do need some money and actually I need you to pay me for it so I can justify setting the time aside. Cause I don't have it to offer, but you might be able to buy a little bit, but I'm still struggling to make the time. I'm like, oh God, I really got to get that time set aside.
Yeah. I mean, cause it's like your time is worth something too.
Because the $500 painting you're talking about, in my mind, from what doing art with caricatures and most like highly skilled jobs is about $60 an hour in my mind. Like I just, in my mind, like if you want me to come draw at your party, it's $60 an hour. Right. Well, then I'm like, okay, well then a $500 painting is like an 8-9 hour job. And I'm like, that's how I would like factor it. If I was just like, oh, how long did it take me? And then what, like, how much of myself did I put into it? Whatever. Anyway. And I don't know, but I'm like, $500 seems reasonable to me.
Yeah.
You should charge more. You should stop feeling shame. I think
I know.
No shame, but double all your prices and then see what happens. Right?
I have artwork in a gallery right now and the gallery takes 40%.
This is the prostitution thing. This is where I was like, why are you getting this cut?
Yeah. So I don't get the $500, you know, I price it so that I get like what I would be happy with getting.
Right.
So
and then they're to mark it up.
Yeah, but it's part of the cost of having the space on the wall. You know, the particular gallery I'm a part of is a nonprofit, so it supports other artists in the community. So I'm okay with that. And that's kind of just the price of doing business, which I understand. But you can buy it from me.
Is that I saw you setting up your first gallery. Is that it? Or have you done multiple now? This is the one you're in. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's called the Foster Gallery and it's in Santa Rosa Beach up here in the Panhandle. It's in a swanky shopping center and it's run by the Cultural Arts Alliance of Walton County. And so as part of it, you apply to get in and they approve the artists that are in there. And then you get a space on the wall. And then as part of the program, you have to volunteer at the gallery and work it, you know, a handful of times during the semester. So I've been working there, volunteering there too.
What do you do there? Are you like, cause it's your work that's being shown that you're like, are you there talking about your work or doing other things there?
Yeah, no, you're just there to check people out if they buy anything. You're kind of just the sales associate. You become a sales associate at the gallery. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you get a commission if anything is sold that you sell. But I haven't, it's been pretty slow. It's been real slow lately. Not a lot. I bet your
used car salesman dad could probably give you some good lessons on moving some art. Like, come in with me, Dad. Sell any paintings today?
Yeah. No, Dad. No.
Thanks for asking.
Still no. No, but just to wrap up the conversation about money, like I know that I have value as an artist, and I know
Mhm.
that any business person like gets to that point where they realize they just have to start charging money, and it's the thing. But I feel like there's this ongoing battle in my brain about the value of art,
Mhm.
and it's just still very intangible to me. And I feel like when you start putting a price tag on it, it cheapens it even
It's
more.
difficult. It's right.
Yeah.
It's like it move well, and it for me it's similar. Like it moves it. It's like it's almost like it's something sacred. So how do we make a dollar value on this? And then when we do, it's almost like to make it profane, to take
Yeah.
away something sacred about it. Although it is by necessity, if you're like that's your vocational, like you probably
Yeah.
gotta live somewhere, right? You probably gotta like eat
Yeah.
something or whatever. Yeah.
And or maybe it's not that sacred. Like
Mm,
maybe people just create stuff all the time and we need to not hold it in such like just because I made a thing doesn't I don't know, doesn't make it valuable either. Like if
that's
it's
right.
a crappy thing,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
So I think that there's also that struggle for artists too, and specifically fine artists, but also designers, you know, where we want to create something good.
Yep.
And just because I create something doesn't make it good.
So when you said maybe it's not sacred, I'm gonna tell you what came to mind. You don't have to address this if it's like wrong to do to another artist or something, but a specific artist comes to mind. I just thought of all the Thomas Kincaid stuff at the malls growing up. Do you remember
Mm.
Thomas Kincaid, the painter
Oh,
of
I have
light?
all of the puzzles. Yes.
Okay. Because I remember like going as an artist, like looking at these and I'm like, these are interesting. They're prints that these like other artists like put the like paint dots on to make them
Mm-hmm.
originals, like air quote originals or whatever. And they created like a mass production of fine
Yeah.
art to sell in malls all over the place. And I
Yeah.
and I remember thinking like, God, this seems like wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's like mass produced or whatever. But you're yeah, anyway, that was the first
You
thing that came
know,
to mind, like not sacred art.
it makes me think of, and this is not throwing him under the bus, but it makes me think of Guy Harvey. Are you
Mm,
familiar with Guy Harvey
the
t-shirts?
fishing. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I
like
had a lot of those growing up. I was a fisherman and
but just like mad respect to Guy Harvey. Like
oh yeah.
that's like that is yeah, I want to be Guy Harvey. That dude probably makes so much money. I mean,
Yeah.
but
That's
he
right.
started with a true love of the craft. Like he started by illustrating Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea,
Yep.
and he did them all himself. They were phenomenal illustrations. If you haven't gone and looked them up, go look up Guy Harvey's illustrations of The Old Man and the Sea. They're beautiful. And then he put on his own art show in Jamaica to
Hmm.
sell them all, and they all sold, but he kept the originals, so he made prints of them that all sold,
Yep.
and that put him on the map. And so people started to recognize him as this fish artist.
Hmm.
And then he said the thing that took him over the edge was he started licensing his artwork. And
Oh,
so,
really? Is that how he ended up on all the t-shirts?
yeah, he started licensing all of his illustrations and paintings. And so it took him far and wide and multiplied his
Everywhere.
footprint everywhere.
Everywhere.
And
It's a
so
great
the guys,
example.
and then he's also like a marine biologist
Of
and
course.
loves the ocean. And so it kind of complements what he already loves. So yeah, I mean, if
It
you
is
can
kind of
license
beautiful.
your
That's kind of
work, that's
awesome.
the yeah, I think it's awesome. You know, there's definitely like the whole sellout mentality, but I think that's
You know, it's
sellout.
interesting. No, you're right. You're not right. It's like weird holding that up to the Kincaid example. I'm like, no, you're
Yeah.
right. Guy Harvey is it probably is very similar. So it's probably unfair to do that to Kincaid. I just have this thought in my mind, but you're right. Guy Harvey, like I had a closet full of those shirts. I wanted all of them. And even as an art, I would lay the shirts out on the bed and draw the
Oh, that's
the
cool.
bass off the shirts. Like I used to use his artwork to learn how to draw fish.
That's amazing. He would
Yeah, I was
probably
like,
love that.
Guy Harvey was like an artist mentor. He doesn't know it, but I was like, man, he's so good at this. He's so good at this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that you have to get your big break as an artist, you
Mm,
know, in the same way that an actor has to get a big break or
yeah.
a band has to, like every even even illustrator has to get that big break where they're discovered. And
You know, what's interesting. So there's and I don't know what it's called, and I don't even know what it's on. There's a docu-series about Wu-Tang Clan on one of the subscription, like, TV things. I don't know if it was on Netflix or Prime. I have no idea. You guys can figure it out. But in the docu, I like Wu-Tang. I love Wu-Tang Clan. I love the whole documentary. It was super fascinating. But at some point they talked about the guy that designed the W that is the Wu-Tang logo. And it was like they paid him $500. It was a dude that drew it. And I remember Erica saying like, man, that's not fair. That's like, he got ripped off. And I'm like, actually, that's really good. He got $500 to draw a W. Right. And what was funny is when we were talking about this, the mural artist that I was talking about was at my house. He was coming through town last week and he was over and he's like, yeah, like that's a decent price for a W. Right. Like that's fine. You have $500. Here's your logo. And it's not the W that made Wu-Tang Clan. Wu-Tang Clan made the W. Right.
Right.
So the W is what it is. And forever that artist now has Wu-Tang in his portfolio. Right. Like, this, my buddy, this artist is like, you should see all my other letters. He's like, yeah, just use Wu-Tang, like sell letters. Like,
you should see my Z.
You should see my Z, man. This one's going to be like $1,200.
But you know what he could have done is if he had known the talent of Wu-Tang at the time, he could have said, don't pay me anything right now. I just want royalties.
Give me 1%. Yeah, 1%. Yeah, exactly.
And he would have been living large. Yeah. So that's always an option, artists out there. There's definitely different pay structures. So
what, let me see here. Let me try to, so when you, okay, we kind of like went off on the shame question from that tattoo on a neighbor kid, the lizard you drew on your neighbor boy's arm. And then, so you did a lemonade stand. Talk to me about some other early work. Was it all art? Was it all being a number two? What were maybe some jobs or whatever? Just talk to me about some early work experience stuff.
Yeah, I've had a lot of jobs. I think my first like actual working job was at Moe's.
Welcome to Moe's.
Welcome to Moe's. Yep. I was a solid 14 years old.
Nice.
And then after that, I worked at the Gap. And I really loved working stock at the Gap. I would show up at 5 a.m. and help them unload the truck and then unload the clothes. And then they were like, oh, wait, you're 15 and this is technically like against child labor laws.
Yes. Yeah, probably.
So but I was like really mad about it because then they made me come in at 6 a.m. And now I'm like going on break at a different time as my team. And so it like really made me upset. So I didn't like it very much after that. So, and then I think I worked at the Gap for a while, and then around the end of high school, I was a lifeguard down here on the beach, which was amazing.
On the beach, you were a lifeguard on the beach. That's like another level lifeguard. That's another level of lifeguard, right?
Yeah, we were an extension of the fire department. So I technically worked for the South Walton Fire Department as a lifeguard.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I did that for 2 summers, and it was just at 18 years old, it was like I was rich. Why would I do anything else but sit on the beach all day and make money?
Yeah, it's a good gig.
Yeah. And I mean, I worked at Busch Gardens or it was not Alvin's Island. It was Islands of Adventure. I was like a guard there.
Yep.
Definitely was like a babysitter. But at very little creative jobs up until very recently.
So how'd that happen then?
I went to school for mass communications and I ended up in the advertising track. And so advertising introduced me to graphic design.
Yep.
And I did an internship for the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay, and I did an internship for PPK in Tampa. And that's when I started dabbling in like designing the flyers for events at the Crisis Center. And I gleaned a lot of information from the people I worked with at the ad agency. And I just started teaching myself graphic design because they didn't teach you in the advertising track. So it kind of spurred from there. And then at the crisis center, I started designing all of their stuff. And then it kind of merged with like a marketing director position.
Mm.
And so everywhere I went after that, I was kind of this like graphic designer slash marketing director.
Yeah.
Whereas some of those places would have a marketing director and then they would hire out their graphic design.
Yep.
I was like this one all in one package.
I could do it all. Yeah.
Yeah, which was good for them and bad for me. So
bad for you. Do 2 jobs for the price of 1.
Yeah, exactly. That was the deal. No, it was good for me because it was a differentiator.
That's right.
And it got me in the door, and it put me a leg above everybody else. So it was definitely a good skill to have developed.
So one of the things I've seen you doing, I don't know, I want to say recently, because I guess all of this in the broad scheme of things is recently, right? But is these is it called graphic note taking? Is that what it's called? Like where you're like,
oh, it's graphic recording.
Recording.
That's like the technical term for it. Yeah.
Just so for those that don't know what it is, tell people what it is, and then just tell me about that experience. I just think that's the coolest thing in the world, and the closest thing to like. It reminds me of being a caricature artist, but in a way more organized and robust way or whatever.
Yeah, so I got introduced to that through a company that I still work for now called Ridge. But it's graphic recording is basically live note taking during a meeting of any kind. It can be a conference, it can be a workshop, it can just be a talk like this. But essentially you're illustrating the notes that are coming out of that meeting, and you can do it in a variety of different ways. There's different styles of graphic recording. It's very much digital now because of COVID, but in the past we were doing it live on like a huge poster board where we would literally draw with markers, and it's fun. It took some training. I had to be trained on how to do this. And a large part of that training was the mental space you need to be in in order to do this. Yeah. Yeah. So the practice of doing it helps you get through the anxiety of like the performance anxiety side of it. Yeah. But I like to perform. Public speaking doesn't scare me. Obviously, dancing in front of people doesn't scare me. But this was a different level because art has always been very close to me. And it's like, there is a lot of potential for me to do something really bad up there on that board, or, draw a horse that does not look like a horse or whatever. And so they teach you kind of like some illustration styles that are really easy and go to, and you start to build up your visual vocabulary. So if somebody says a word like strategy, what are you going to draw? Or if they say the word challenge, how are you going to narrow that into an icon? Or if they say the word, like humility, what do you draw for that? So learning how to visualize these complex ideas was a big part of it too.
I drew a blank on all of those, by the way.
Yeah.
Like I would draw the word humility in block letters because I don't know.
Which is an option. That's always an option.
It's like you did a really good job at making bubble letters about everything we talked about. But the stuff is so cool. Like so from caricature artists, and why I thought this probably is like that is exactly that. Like you learn, I love that you said like visual vocabulary. I didn't have vocabulary for that, but it's like you learn a book full of noses, you learn a book full of eyes. Like there's certain things that just like, there's only so many, we all have eyes, right? So there's only so many shapes, and you're going to learn them. And that's just the face. And then it's the combination of those things. And then you learn a style, how you put those things together. And I imagine conferences, there's like, as these examples, like strategy probably comes up often. So we're like, well, we've got some stuff around that. We've got some stuff like there's things that were like goals, like, goal setting is going to come up at almost everything we're talking about. And so you probably have a good bank of things. Just like, okay, I've learned, now I have a palette of visual vocabulary. And then you start piecing that together, but it's a lot of freestyle, right?
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of improvisation that happens.
So I'm curious, do you have anything else that you've done that you would say is improv? Like, have you done improv?
I've done improv, yes.
You have done improv. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm curious about that, like just in general. So from the visual art to doing improv, like I think of like someone trying to freestyle, like hip hop or whatever. It's like, I don't know. I feel like that's a particular kind of work that you're right. Like maybe a lot of the training for that is about mental space. I know if you like, so I suck at this stuff because I've gone to some improv classes, and all of those improv classes just want me to do things that make me feel really, I don't have a word for this.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. Well, if you think about it, we're improvising right now.
So I'm good at improvisation in real life, conversationally. Like I actually love the chaotic. I love the unexpected. I love having to figure out what to do in real time. And I guess it's always done on stage in some sense, like it's in front of God, it's in front of other people. It's like there is an audience at some level. And yeah, so that makes sense. It's like similarly related, right? Like you're always kind of doing that. And there's just a particular pressure, I guess, when we're like, now we're doing it.
Yeah, the thing that I learned, one of the biggest lessons of improv is yes and, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard that where and improv is very much a team sport. So you're never improving alone. You're always riffing off of your teammates, and the best improvers make their fellow performers look good. And so in order to do that, they say something, and it could be the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard, but you're like, yep, that's what we're going with, and I'm going to add to that.
Yep.
So yes and is always happening, and yes and is such a crucial conversation tool.
Yeah.
Because you notice when you're talking to somebody, if they start negating everything you say and
That's
start
stupid.
disagreeing with everything you say, it just shuts you down.
It does.
What you want to do, I'm sorry, my family's talking in the background, but that's just what we're doing.
Bless them. It's all good.
So yes, anding things helps ideas move forward, and it helps you expand your mind and stay in an open-minded place. And that's a lot of what we did in graphic recording was, okay, I have to stay open-minded, because there could be a moment where you want to shut down and say, like, I don't know where they're going with this talk. I don't know what I'm going to draw next. And you start to like spiral downward. And so you have to stop yourself and stay open. And you can get like that on stage too, where you're like, oh no, I'm totally blanking. What am I going to say next? And so you have to be able to shut that down immediately and just commit. So the second thing I learned about improv was committing. And so it doesn't matter what you're committing to, you just do it to the fullest degree. Of if you are the bartender, you're gonna bartender so hard. Or if, like, for example, we did a show after our first class where I had to be a luchador.
What is that?
Like a Mexican wrestler.
I love it. Okay.
So we're playing this game called Taxi Cab, and we ask the audience for a suggestion, and they say luchadors. So my taxi driver pulls up, and I have to be the luchador. So I have to get in the taxi and then act like this wrestler. And what are you going to do? How do you be a wrestler inside a taxi cab? But I was just jumping on the chairs. And at one point I like pretended to like body slam her. And then I like literally hooked my elbow around her and like took her to the ground. And it was just, and people were just dying. Like they loved it. And that was like committing fully to the character. And when you're, and you do the same thing in graphic recording too, where say I'm going to draw a globe or something and it takes up half the board. It's like, well, I guess that's what we're doing now. We just took up half the board with this globe. So you got to just commit to it. It's like a decision that you make and you keep going. So
So okay, this is really good. So no, I feel like I'm really glad we're scratching at this a little bit. So because
I
there's
love improv, by the way. I'll talk to you about improv all day.
well, so I feel like there's a real lesson in all of this. And you're right. You're like, we're improving right now. And in some level, like this is why I'm like, oh, I think this is really worth exploring in all of our work and all of our life. There's an element of like, you're always kind of doing this. So when you talked like you're like, oh, I can kind of spiral down, like, uh-oh, now what? Um, whether you're on stage or you're speaking, or I don't know what my next line is, or I can't find where I'm at in my notes, or I don't know what to draw now, or I don't know what the hell they're talking about, or whatever when
Mhm.
you're doing graphic recording. And what comes to mind is self-consciousness, right? So like there's a way in which the more you're aware of you. So if you're so this is probably the reason that I struggle with dancing, because I just think about what I look like. And I actually, by the way, okay, let's take a little aside here. I'm going to tell you, this is like,
Let's talk about John
here's
dancing.
some vulnerable here. Let's get vulnerable. So when I was younger, and I kind of first, it's no secret. Like when I first like encountered, like became a Christian, really had any like thought about God. I became a Christian because I took too much LSD one night and I encountered
Oh
God. Like
man.
I met Jesus on LSD. And when I was done with the LSD, I was like, I'm following Jesus now. And then I didn't get really involved in any church or anything for a while, but I started early on, and this didn't stick with me, probably because of sleep apnea or something, but I started having a lot of vivid dreams early on that I really took as like God is telling me something, speaking to me, this and that. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
have this, I mean, I probably have paintings of this dream somewhere if I go dig through my sketchbooks or look around for it. Probably one of the most important dreams I think I ever had was I had this dream that there's a lot of detail to the dream, but basically like there was like a vision of heaven, and it was like, so I walked through this field and the field was dirty. This was like you had to get to heaven basically. So you went through like hell to get to heaven. So there was like it's muddy and dirty and everyone's like nasty and just a terrible crowd of people and it's crowded and you got to walk through it. But as you got closer and closer to there was like this picture like a garden, but like flowers that are, I mean, like a flower you'd see in your like a lily, but like huge, like a tree, like lilies hanging over,
Whoa.
and they were glowing. So they were like everything was lit up by these flowers, and
Whoa, it's like Pandora.
super beautiful. And then it was on the coast, and then out over the water, there was like a little island, and I feel like the whole island was like music was coming from this island. So there's like this beautiful music and all this light, and everyone's kind of there, and you have enough space or whatever. Like it wasn't like the muddy place. It was just this beautiful place. Well, and this is when I realized like, oh, I think this is heaven, was the lights all went out. So you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So all the flowers didn't light up anymore. Like it just went out and it was pitch black dark. And the music was the best music you've ever heard in your life, right? Like it was just the most beautiful music. And I was just like, I can't help but dance. And so I started dancing to this music. And I was like, man, I'm really glad the lights went out because otherwise I couldn't do this. Like if the lights were on, I couldn't dance, but the lights are out and I just start dancing. And then I get like raptured by this music and I'm dancing like a fool, like that crazy man in the middle of the field. Like I'm just dancing and the lights come back on. And then you look around at this field and everyone is dancing like they've never danced. Right. And no one cared that the lights came back on and everyone's dance was their dance. It was like unique fingerprints, these dances. And it was this, and it, anyway, I don't remember, there's more to the dream, whatever, but this is the thing I remember, like where I'm like, if I go try to dance and the lights are on, like real time, let's go dance. I'm like, I can't dance. This isn't going to work.
Yeah.
But in this dream, they went out and I like found my dance, let's say. and they came back on, and now I found myself, and it was okay. I was like, I'm okay now that the lights are on. I found the group, which made me think of like flow state a lot. Like
Yeah.
I lost the self-consciousness because I was raptured in the activity.
Wow.
And as you were talking about getting stuck on stage, I started thinking like, well, that's kind of why I can't dance. Like, oh, I start spiraling mentally. It's a
Mm-hmm.
psychological space. And I've been there speaking, or, there's moments, even conversationally, where you're like, oh shit, I don't know what to say to this person that
Mm-hmm.
just shared this thing with me or whatever. And you
Yeah.
kind of, and the more you look at yourself, like because what you said was you got to get out of that place immediately,
Right.
because it will get worse. You will perform. You can't perform your way out of that headspace, because
Right.
the headspace will take you out. Like, thinking about what you're painting makes your painting suck. Something like that, right?
Yeah. It's the thinking mind,
Yeah.
the anxious thoughts start to take over. Yeah.
And you contrasted that with like, you just commit or decide. And I'm curious, like, I don't know if something like emerges there for you. And I actually was wondering about flow state itself. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
paint, you do a lot of art, you have done improv, like, the experience of going, I lost track of time, I didn't stop to eat, I'm in love with what I'm doing. And in some
Yeah.
sense, one of the attributes of flow state is a loss of self-consciousness. Like, that's one of the things, like, oh, you forgot yourself
Yeah. It's,
in the
I would say it's almost required for sure.
talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit.
Yeah, we got into flow state. I actually learned about it through hula hooping, because when
Oh.
you start dancing in hula hooping, they call it flow. And that was kind of my first introduction to flow. But you have to reach a level of I don't know. I think you have to reach some kind of skill level in order to be able to go into a flow state.
Yep.
Yeah, so you have to be, or you have to just be willing to be bad at something and be in a flow state and do it badly, So, I mean, I'd be curious to know if you disagree or agree on that. But from my experience, a flow state isn't really possible until I've developed some mastery of the skill that I'm doing, so that I can lose myself and not think so much about what I'm doing. But, I'm going to argue with myself on that one
I
too,
love it. One of us is gonna.
Because there's also this thing that I just learned about called intuitive drawing, where this teacher used to do it with his students. I actually heard about it on another podcast. And he would, before class, he would have his students do intuitive drawing, where they're not allowed to think about what they're drawing. They're not allowed to create any form at all. They're just, I think they meditate for like 10 minutes beforehand, and then they go into drawing. And it's supposed to just awaken the creative side, and give yourself permission to make mistakes, and just get in touch with the materials and start to feel how the color is being applied to the paper, and feel the crayon crumbling on your fingers. And so that is supposed to kind of remove this mental block of creating. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of studying, I guess, or just reading up on like books and The Power of Now, and also Michael Singer's Surrender Experiment or The Untethered Soul. And it's just been a constant theme throughout a lot of what people have been talking about lately, is just our minds, and how our minds kind of take siege of our lives if we let them. And so flow state is this beautiful place where the mind is not really participating. So flow state has been harder for me with art, though.
Really?
Yeah, I'm a little too wrapped up in my perfectionism when it comes to art. Once I get to mural painting, though, hold on one second.
Yep.
Okay, we were having a basketball lesson, then I had to shut down.
I had a feeling I knew where you were going.
I was like, this is not going to go away anytime
Well,
soon.
it's funny, you walked away. I was like, I'm going to get to watch her scream. I thought
no, okay, so
you've had a hard time getting into flow with art.
Yeah, until I'm at, like, when it comes to murals, I feel like I can reach a flow state when I'm painting a mural because all the figuring out process has already been done.
Ahead of
And
time.
now I just get to create. And so that's why I love painting murals so much, is because I get to experience that flow state. Whereas you don't really get that in graphic design very much because you're constantly thinking and figuring it out. But maybe painting. Painting is just not as natural to me. So it's been a little harder for me to get into that.
So you made a comment about like having to have some level of mastery at something, and you know what, you and I went rock climbing together, right, with a bunch of people several years ago. Do you ever come with us? I feel like you did.
Oh yeah, that
Right.
was a long time ago.
It was.
Yeah.
But rock climbing is this interesting thing where it feels like analogous. So there's something about being able to do something, but not like it's so I realize rock climbing, something that I'm like really like a deep motivator. It's that thing I can't reach. So like I can
Yeah.
climb this, but there's that next hold. And my
Mhm.
mind fixates. Like it's like, yeah, I don't give a shit about these 8 that I can do. It's the one I can't reach. And I don't care about the
Mm.
one beyond that either. But I like fixate on the one I can't get to. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, there is a special kind of like motivation and almost like like I go in a zone where I'm like, all I think about is that thing I can't reach.
Yeah.
And
So you think that's a flow state, is being up on the wall and just focusing on that one thing?
I think it's related, and I use that as an analogy because I actually think if I had to say, like, if you had to, let's say I want to create flow state, or what is a necessity, you're saying, well, I think you have to have a level of mastery. I
Mm.
would say I think you have to have some experience. So
Mhm.
you can't pick up a paintbrush for the first time and go into flow state, probably, unless you're doing some weird meditative thing where you don't care what you're painting. But like,
Right.
right. But generally speaking, you're going to like, you need to learn the tool. But once you have a little bit of skill, like I know how to use the tool.
Mhm.
And this could be just writing a story, like you've learned how to write and now you're writing something or whatever. It can happen in lots of places, but I feel like you want to be situated between I'm good at this
Yeah.
and I don't know what I'm doing. So I can't come in and do this for the like I'm not going to pick up a hula hoop and get in flow state, right?
Mhm.
Because I'm going to be like, I can't keep it around my waist and I'm just mad the whole time, whatever.
You're the only person who's mad while they're hooping.
Yeah, I'm just like, I hate hula hoop. I can't do this, but I love watching you guys have such a good time or whatever. So like, but it's
Good
like,
for you guys.
I'm so happy for you. But it's that it's like, so I'm like, I think you're right. You have to have some familiarity with whatever it is you're doing,
Yeah.
but then you have to have somewhere to go. Like I don't have this down, right? Where you're like in that, because it's got to be challenging.
Mm.
So if you're drawing something you like, for example, when I drew caricatures, that almost, I don't think it ever happened
Mm.
because I'm just drawing the same thing. Again, it's not challenging me.
Yeah. You're not getting lost in it.
Yeah, there needs to be a challenge. Like
Mm.
this is a little beyond me, but not so far beyond me that self-consciousness kicks in where I'm like, I'm not capable of doing this. And if you can find that spot, that I believe that's the spot, like, which is why I'm like, wherever you're at with your skill level, you want to try to get to the next rung on the ladder. Like what is just beyond you, right?
Mhm.
And reach for that because that will wake something up in you.
Do you think flow state is required to get to that next level?
Oh, interesting. I don't know that I could say anything is required. Is it required? You know what? I don't know. But I do know that generally, like on the studies, like studies done on flow state, like we definitely perform better.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, so I talked to a guy on here. I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was Ian, that was talking about like what you don't want with flow state. So he's like, flow state is wonderful and you can accomplish things you couldn't otherwise do, especially if you're like picture like you're trying to do like you're riding a bike and doing tricks, like freestyle tricks or something. Like there are things that you need to hit a zone to be able to do some of these things. And they'll like take you beyond what you're normally capable of because you aren't self-conscious, because you dropped a lot of the baggage you normally carry around. But he's like, you don't ever want to make a major life decision in that state. Like,
ooh, what?
Yeah, he's like,
man, I would have never even thought about that.
He's like, there's some things that are like, it's an intoxicant.
You need
it's
critical thinking,
and you need to come out of that and think about what you're doing. Right? You can't. He's like, you can't live in that.
Oh, wow.
Right? Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Because for me, that experience has always been like I have associated with tasting eternal life. Where I'm like, because it's timeless. It feels like time dilates and there's no real sense of like, oh my God, it's been 8 hours that I've been working on this thing. And it felt like 10 minutes, it just time just vanished. And I was so engaged and so like, just, really when you find something you can sink your teeth into. So for me, I don't know that I would ever say there's a requirement to go in flow state. Cause I actually wonder, there's probably people that don't know this experience.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No.
Well, I was going to say that I think it brings a deeper level of satisfaction to your work if you are able to engage in a flow state every now and then with it, for sure.
Oh, for me, I'm like, that's that. And maybe that's what I was saying. Like why I don't think it's a requirement is I think it's a gift or a byproduct. And you used a word earlier that I still don't know what I would draw for this. And I wish you would tell me what the answer was. Humility. I don't know what I would draw. What do you draw for humility?
Oh man. Well, let's brainstorm it.
I have nothing but blank canvas. I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Maybe a man prostrating himself on the ground.
Yeah. Could be that. Okay. Yeah. See,
maybe somebody kneeling. Yeah.
There's 2 more. That's 200% more than I came up with. So, but like humility as a virtue, I would say is probably something that's a byproduct of doing something else. Like
that's right. You can't pursue humility directly, right?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, I'm going to be humble.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way. And flow state is like, you can set the stage for it, but it's almost like something happens to you. Something gets a hold, something outside of yourself grabs a hold of your attention, right?
Yeah.
It feels that way, like the presence of God, or like, whatever you might want to call that. It's like something you could set a stage for it. But so that's why I'd be like, I don't know that I'd say there's a requirement for it, because I actually think there's probably some of us in such a mental condition that that's not a possibility. Right. So I would hate to be like, well, then you can't do it. Like whatever, you can't do this thing you wish you could do or whatever. But like when you were talking, but I do think it's related to what, and this is why this all kind of emerged out of you talking, like you were like, you can't get self-conscious. You gotta like get in a certain mind state. So we have some tools we can use for that. Yes. But you have to commit. So you have to, and this is what stands out to me on the theme of work ethic. I'm like, so I think a decision, you have to decide to commit. And decisions in my mind are centrally important. Like, you're deciding who you're going to be, what you're going to do, what you're going to accomplish. And it is, if I say, just like earlier, I was like, I want to say yes to these things where I should have said no, is like to decide. By the way, I just think this is a really cool etymology thing. Like incision is to cut into and decision is to cut off. And so like, it's like, if I decide to order this meal, then I decided not to order all these other meals. Right. Which is why a lot of us are paralyzed by making decisions.
That's right.
I want all the things, right? I don't want to say, because to say I will do this is to say I won't do, like I will live in Tampa means I won't live in Orlando.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I decide to do this other thing, I'm saying no to something else. And so for you, it's like, well, part of what I hear you saying, you're saying no to is self-consciousness. What you're saying no to is saying no to this option that's in front of you or whatever. But I actually that's why I wanted to scratch at this. Cause I was like, I think there's so much there.
Yeah.
To like, almost like it's almost a philosophical statement I think you're making, like, and like, just, I don't know, whether it's relationships we decide to be in or not be in, like all of our life decisions and like the
Yeah.
direction we go take commitment. And then what comes next in my mind is sacrifice. And I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm wondering what this is triggering for, like, outside of the context of improv to the rest of your life, but like
Yeah.
it's related, right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot about committing to a field of work, even
Mm-hmm.
committing to a job. At any, like, I feel like now at any point in time, we could just decide to go in a completely different direction
Yep.
with our work or our career paths. And that is crippling. I've struggled with that so much.
Mm.
I would almost rather somebody just tell me what I'm supposed to do.
You like being number two.
Yeah.
Where are we going? All right, let's get there.
All right, here we go.
I'm a good soldier.
Yeah. But of course, when I'm in there, I'm like, wait, I don't actually like this. I want to do my own thing. So maybe that's less true than I believe it to be. So I've been really struggling with, like, does it matter what you do? And, the idea that just picking a direction is better than not, being paralyzed by not choosing a direction. So just get the ball rolling, and then you get some momentum, and then just start to steer it, like steer the rock down the hill, but just push it off the hill. Like if you're listening to this and you don't know what direction to go in, it doesn't matter. Just pick one and you can steer from there. Like I remember being crippled with choosing my major in college. And like it felt like the gravity of the world.
It's the end of the world
resting on this one decision of whether I should do PR or advertising, which are different careers, but the education you're going to get is going to still benefit you regardless of which direction you go in. So, it's like, I think decisions are really important, but I also think that they're not as concrete as you think they're going to be, unless you're choosing to marry someone. I think that's a pretty big decision, or choosing to have kids. Those are obviously lifelong.
Don't be in flow state. Don't be in flow state. Pump the brakes right quick. Count the cost. Well, but what you're saying about a vocational decision, so I think you're spot on correct. Like your advice to anyone listening, like that's stuck, because it's like not deciding is a decision. And and one of the things that I just repeat to myself and other people a lot is the decisions that we make are making us. So if this, by the way, today's a great example of this. So I normally get up and go to the gym, but we just started this Friday morning kinship that we're doing. And I'm not sure if I can go to the gym and make it in on time for that. So I decided not to go to the gym, which means the decision was don't go to the gym. That's fine. But what it equaled in the morning was I decided to hit the snooze button until I had to get up and go to this place. And I know for sure, and I've watched this, especially over some of this COVID time. I'm like, oh, this is going to hurt. Like it's because it's made it easier to make some of the softer decisions, like not getting up in the morning. So I legitimately go, man, if you hit that snooze button today, you're way more likely to hit it tomorrow. Yeah. Because you're actually a different person tomorrow. Like you're shaping yourself, you're conditioning yourself into something. If you decide to do the hard thing, you're stronger. Like you conquered the little battle you had, and now you're stronger when you face the next one. And similar to what you're saying, like, I just think, man, if we get paralyzed by not making a decision, or you said, I want someone else to make the decision, that's a decision, right? Like a lot of us do that. We export, like, why don't someone else tell me what I should do here? That is a form of making a decision. There's like regardless of the decision we're making, it's like the mode with which we make it or whatever, like how we go about making a decision. And I think you're right. I'm like, anything is better than being stuck in that place, because it's very similar to what you're saying about being on stage and going, uh-oh. And it's like, you could do that existentially with your entire being. right? By just being paralyzed, like the weight of the world hangs on this. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you could decide, commit, and then, like you said, steer it as it rolls down the hill. I like that. It's like, you just make more decisions. Like
Yeah,
you could jump into a vocation and go, I immediately regret this decision. And it's like,
for
okay,
sure.
cool. Make another one.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Then quit and
then
start
quit,
something
make
else.
another
Yeah.
decision. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
I think,
always a third option. Somebody told that to me once. They're like, if you're deciding between two things, like always ask yourself, what's the third option?
yeah.
And then it helps expand your mind to not be so caught up in the decision itself. Yeah.
Now, I know you were saying, she said, I've been wondering lately, does it matter what you do? And then you led into someone being kind of stuck in not doing.
Hmm.
But I want to come back to that question, not in that context. Like, does it matter what you do? As in, like, I'm just curious where you're at, what that you said, I've been asking that. Is it
Yeah.
particular to not doing something? Or is it like, well, if I do this or that, and does it matter? Does it really matter?
I think I'm in the mode of like, it's less about what you do and it's more about how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's more about putting your full self into your work. If there's something that you're doing that you really just don't connect with,
Yep.
maybe that's different, but thinking about in this present moment, what can I do to connect with this?
Yeah.
Or how can I fully invest in this to make this something like it's like, I know a lot of people say like, it doesn't matter if you're mopping floors or if you're the CEO of a company, but like sometimes it does, So if you're something you're doing is like sucking the life of you,
Right.
I'm still thinking it through. Like, how much does that matter? But I think if you did start to invest in the how, then the what would develop.
So this is so good. And actually, I would say is centrally why this podcast exists. So the work ethic emerged from, I think, the phrase sucking the life out of you, where like people would say like this soul sucking job or whatever. And it does something deep in me where I'm like, man, I think we're built to work. We're built to produce and create and do. I think it's a gift. And the idea that like our toil now, knowing a lot of people in poverty, I recognize sometimes you just have to do something for the economics of it. And you get into toil, purposeless toil that is so, and I get it. So it is a bit of a privilege to be able to think about how we do it or whatever. Like some of us don't have the freedoms, but in what I would say, how we're intent, like as what is human beings are created for, I'm like, you're created to work and you're created to produce and do, and you have something to offer, value to offer to the world. And at one level, the person who says, well, it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or the janitor, I might agree with that at the level, at a very deep, profound level. But I think it does matter, like if it's a soul sucking position. And I think, so you said, you familiar with Simon Sinek's TED Talk?
Sure.
You know, Simon says start with why.
Yeah.
It reminded me of that because it's like another layer to that. He's like, why?
He goes down to
how,
the why. Yeah.
What? And it is a little bit like what is a bit irrelevant. Like, I'm a bricklayer. So what? Right. But it's like, but I'm a bricklayer building a beautiful city, building house of God. Like
exactly
why I'm doing this thing affects how I go about doing it. Right.
Yeah.
And
I've actually been doing a lot of that personal work for myself. Cause I think the what, here I go with my air quotes again. I think the what,
yeah.
I've been trying to focus too much on the what. And so I've had to come back and really dig a little bit deeper and say, what's my why for working? And then from that why, the how and the what will emerge.
Well, and I don't know if we got time for this here, and it's probably for another time when we're not recording it. But I actually, and there may be something I need, like I may want to hit you up for work. If you're game, but like and I don't know if this, so there's like the actual, like, oh, I might need something, but versus like what you're actually saying. I just wonder if this gets at it a little bit. So I've been toying with this idea. So if you listen to me enough and you hear, whether it's on the podcast or the things I'm doing, like, so we launch Well Built Bikes, and it started out like this really cheesy name, like the Wells Building Bikes, they're well built, get it? And like, I was like, oh, that'll work. We'll go with that. But as it shaped into a brand, let's say, and as I fleshed out the vision beyond the bike shop, but like what I really hope for, the vision of a well-built city started really coming together for me, where I'm like, no, but like a city where neighbors know each other and have what they need and are connected around like meaningful stories and a commitment to each other and place. And like, you know, something that I believe is a common dream for all of us. And I also am just jealous of cities that like where you go and it's like Detroit hustles harder and, you know, keep Portland weird or whatever, like these cities that have branded the city in a way. And I was like, no joke, the Super Bowl's in Tampa this weekend. And I'm like, I wish I had enough money to buy a billboard that says, welcome to the well-built city. Like right outside of the, because I'm like, I want so badly to like brand for a better world. Like to like, does that make sense? Like to go, like, I actually would like to leverage. Now I don't have vision. I don't have the capacity to actually like to execute on some of the, like the actual, let's say I'm gonna have to look at my note on the visual strategist stuff, right? Like the actual design stuff where it's like, I mean, I did like some graphic art stuff. I can make you a logo, but that's not the point of what I'm saying. Is more like the story and the vision that this thing is part of, what it's calling us to where I'm like, I hope that can transcend us to actually go like, and there is a kind of way that marketing is moving into purposeful, like it just has to, because I think the ethos of the world is changing. Like corporations are having to say why they exist and how they're good for the world. And you can't just be the corporations like they used to be. We're at least greenwashing them at this point, right?
Yeah. You have to care
be
about
a good neighbor, right? To be exist for something. And I just wonder, cause I'm like, yeah, like in the end, I think it would, like, if I'm making logos, I'm like, or if I'm doing social media or whatever, I'm like making visual art for a corporation. I'm like, it seems like it'd be very different. Like, you know, like even if I'm a bricklayer, it's different to like, I'm building, you know, I don't know, I'm building a nondescript house versus I'm building a church, city hall. I'm building a city. Like it's the bigger picture of what it is that we're doing. And, well, anyway, in real life, I might actually want to talk with you more about like, can you help me with this?
For
chew
sure.
on that a little bit. And as I raise some money to throw,
if you can afford me,
I know 500 an hour, but no, if I can afford you is the right, is exactly what I'm saying. But then in the back to the actual thing you're saying is like it is setting in context, like, okay, here's what I'm good at and what I'm doing, but how it can be like leveraged for what, like why, or the kind of world I hope to live in, or like something maybe deeper that has shape and meaning around it. Anyway, I don't know if that's exactly maybe overlapping with what you were getting at with that, but it's what came to mind, right? Is like maybe those deeper questions of what we're here for.
Yeah. I think about, like, it makes me think about this company that I just got introduced to here in Destin. They're a beach chair company. And on the outside, you may be able to say like, oh, all they do is set up beach chairs for like tourists. But if you actually look at their values and like their mission as a company, like they actually hire guys that they want to invest in their lives, and they want to have values of teamwork. And it's more about the people who are working for their company, and slinging beach chairs is just like a means to an end, you know. What they're really about is this like core group of people, and investing in those people, and work ethic, and physical fitness, and, you know, mental health. And so it's like, you know, I think that's an example of like how you're doing something in contrast to what you're doing.
That's right. That's a really good example of that too. Cause it's like, well, if we if we lost the contract to do beach chairs, we could do junk removal. We could do lawn services. Like and that resonates with me deeply. Like, I'm like, the bicycles are a great tool.
Yeah.
And they're a tool that overlap with a lot of things we care about. Like, they're ecologically good. They're good for your physical health, mental health. They build community. They're a common ground between the rich and the poor. Like, they're a really good tool. And there's a lot, but I'm like, I mean, it's not about bikes.
Right.
Yeah. Like, that's kind of beside the point. Like, any tool will do, but that seems to be the best one available to us. Right.
Yeah. It was the exact same thing with hula hooping. Like, it wasn't about hula hooping.
That's right.
It was about building community. It was about, breaking barriers. It was about being free and having fun. Like, we could have done it with anything, but hula hoop was just our tool, and I would love to do that with art. I want art to just be a means to how I want to help the environment, or want to bring people together to inspire them to help the environment or change their behaviors and that sort of thing. So that's really the direction that I want to go with it. It's like my making art that's cool is not my goal. I want it to like inspire people to do a thing, or I want it to push them in a direction. So
nothing does that like art. Like, art really has the power to shape culture. It just genuinely does. Like, we just look back over time, what music and visual art and movies, and like, we are so formed by the murals and the just the artwork that we have around us. And I just think that's just such it's like, that's actually how it works. And you actually can do that, right?
Yeah. I heard a quote recently that was talking about like the human species. And they were saying like the differentiator of humans is we're a cultural species. Like, we have culture, we do have music, we tell stories, like we express ourselves in creative ways. Yeah.
So I'm curious, this is a bit of a segue, but I don't want to not ask you before we run out of time. So I try to ask everyone, how would you define success?
Oh my gosh. These are those questions that I wanted you to give me ahead of time so that I have a chance to prepare, okay?
No. It's more fun this way.
How would I define success? I think success is when you are becoming the best version of yourself and helping those around you become the best version of themselves too. I think success is an individual pursuit, but I think it cannot be done at the expense of others. It has to also be communal.
Success
You're not
is an
successful.
Individual pursuit, but it can't be done at the expense of others. It must be done communal.
It must be communal.
It must be communal. Write that down. If you haven't said that 100 times, like, that's so good. That's so good.
I was just improvising.
That's so good. I'm pulling that out.
Which makes me think, like, what am I actually doing to be communally successful? Maybe I need to look at that.
Yeah, it's a really good answer. And it does and I know it's a good answer because it's challenging. It makes all of us go, like, how are we doing that? Like, you start with going, well, to be the best version of yourself and to help other people be the best version of themselves. But to go further and say it is an individual pursuit. Like, you have to do it, but you have to do it in community. I'll be chewing on that all week.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that success is just a really crowded room at your funeral.
So good. Keep them coming. God, you're ridiculous. What do you mean by that? What do you mean? I think I know what you mean by that, but just in case someone listening is like, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
Like, just people being impacted by your life, in a way that they want to come pay their respect to you, and to them be able to say, like, this person impacted me in this way. Like, your life had meaning far beyond yourself. You know, it
Yeah.
had meaning for those around you too.
Mm,
Yeah.
man, that's good. See here. How are you on time?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you want to invite people to do, look at, see, like anything you want to like plug?
Oh, I probably should be prepared with that. I would say, are most of the people listening probably from Tampa, St. Pete?
I would say probably the majority, but like as I look at the little like analytic map, it's actually it's broader than I would think.
Yeah.
Like who do I know in Ireland that's listening? What's
That's
up,
awesome.
Ireland? It seems like a few folks over there.
Ireland in the house. I would just say like say yes to things. Like don't be afraid to say yes to things. And I was talking to a friend about this just this morning or yesterday, was like embrace your weird. Like get real weird. Like stop being so self-conscious and just start getting weird, because that's really what's going to differentiate you, and it's also going to clue you into what brings you joy. And when you can
really good.
when you can tap into those things, then you can really probably start being that best version of yourself.
Yeah, that resonates actually. Like it's weird. Like I
feel like I'm not weird enough. You know, I will confess, like, I don't think I'm nearly weird enough, and I need to be.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like when you say get weird and what comes to mind about being weird, I'm like, I don't think I'm that weird.
Yeah.
But I don't. And I'm like,
but
no.
You are, in the sense of how you engage
Right.
with the homeless community.
I am weird in a lot of ways in my lifestyle and value set, right? Like it's like I'm not typical. I'm very atypical in the way that I think, in the way that I talk, in the way that I engage in the world. Like I know that it's actually weird. And so it's an interesting thing because like I hear get weird and I'm like, no, I'm good. But I'm like, actually, no, I believe in that, because it's like, no, be yourself.
Yeah, the lake
like
house
in
was
some
real
sense,
weird.
like be. That's true. It was just home, like it was super home. You're right. It was a little weird. It was a little weird.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good. But no, it's that. It's like somehow being authentically yourself, and like in a way that is, I think that's the thing, right? Is like we're self-conscious of the ways we're different or maybe stand out, and we don't want to stand out because that's dangerous or something, right? And maybe I'll get made fun of, and maybe people won't like me, and you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And yet those idiosyncratic, it's like that dream I had in those dances we did when no one was looking. It's like that thing, like who you are when no one's looking.
Yeah.
It's kind of like who you are.
Yeah.
And like who maybe you were created to be, and perhaps you're most valuable to the world when you're that.
And maybe you have to get weird in the dark first.
Oh, let's get so it's title the show. Let's get weird in the dark. I love it.
Yeah, take that in whatever direction you want to take it, but like, you know, maybe you have to embrace your weird first before maybe you want to show it to other people. Like you have to be comfortable with people rejecting you.
Yeah.
Like you have to be comfortable and love yourself and your weird idiosyncrasies. So
what was the process for you? Hold on, I feel like that's too big of a leap. Let's stay here for a minute. So that seems really right to me, but because there's something like you have to, so there's so much in what you just said, like to love yourself, to let yourself be who you are. Maybe it is easiest to do it in the dark, right? But then like to jump to like be okay with criticism. It's like it's connected to loving yourself, but that's quite the feat. Like it's like I could just put myself in the shoes of a listener, like easy for you to say, Sarah. Look at your art. It's amazing. Everyone loves what you do.
Oh man, I care far too much what people think of me. Of course, yeah.
Do you?
Oh yeah. I mean, who doesn't really? But I mean, yeah. But
Yeah.
trying to care less about it, you know. Yeah.
Well, and it is true. Like I try to practice not caring. You know, like I do think I care less than most people around me. Because I mean, I like, there's a very deep way in which I'm like, I really don't care. Like I am in my mind, like playing for an audience of one. Like, I don't care what you think, what your assessment of this is, but I can't dance in front of you. Like that's, so it's like it's true and it's not true, but it is actually
maybe in certain arenas it's true. Yeah.
So a couple episodes ago, I was talking to Melanie Hicks. It's a great episode if you haven't heard it. And she's working on a book. I think the book is called Incongruent. It's about to come out, but it's actually, and I found out on the show she was publishing this book, and she's like, yeah, and it's kind of about our relationship with work and vocation. I'm like, oh, let's talk more about that. That's perfect. And she talked about this like overlap of something you love doing and something you're good at, as like a thing, like finding your vocation or calling. And I pushed back on that. I was like, I think you're right, but I feel like there's another circle that needs to be part of that, which is like something like duty, or
something the
world needs it. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Like something the world actually needs, right? Just because like this is the example that comes to mind. Let's just say there's things you could be good at and really love doing that that you just, no one wants you to do and you shouldn't be doing, right? Like that's all of the examples I have are like, I shouldn't really echo here, but you can use your imagination.
We're picking up what you're putting down.
So like, but I'm like, no, it's got to be something valuable, something the world needs, something that serves some greater purpose or whatever.
Yeah.
And we were kind of talking through that, but I was like, I said, well, talk to me about duty. Like, because there's some things that I do because it's needed, like because it's right, because it's good. And I don't like doing it, but I don't think liking doing it matters. So for example, I'm a major introvert. People don't read that because I'm enthusiastic and assertive, but I want to be alone always. Like I really like being alone, but I also like one-on-one because this is the closest to alone, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to mingle in a party ever. So I'm an introvert. I don't like being with other people, but like I'm never alone. Never. I'm always with other people. I lived in community and whatever. But it's like a lot of times it's like, yeah, I do the thing because it's right or in lines with a value or something like that. And I was like, I don't think enjoying it matters that much in the scheme of things. And I asked her about that, and her response, I think she answered it really, really great. I've been thinking about it since we spoke. She said, well, it depends where that duty comes from. So if it's like mom and dad want me to do this, it shouldn't, I don't believe it should factor in. She's like, if I have a sense of duty from within, like my conscience says, do it, then like, it doesn't matter if it's enjoyable or if you're good at it. Like you do it because it's right. Like people are starving out here. You better get some food, and you might not like doing it. You might not be any good at it, but you should probably do something about that. Right. And that really resonated a lot. And it took me too long to say all that to circle back to the thing that you were saying. Hopefully you can help me do that because it was related. I was like, and it was like where that call comes from.
Yeah.
Right. So what other people think or those kind of things, it's like, it isn't a matter of something you want from me, but something maybe God wants from me, or I want from me, or conscience wants from me, or however you want to frame that, depending on your framework, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like if this doesn't please you, like it doesn't matter because it's going to please the next person, because this is something that I have to do. Like if you're trying to get a book published, if you don't want it, fine, but it's going to get published somewhere. Or, if you know deep down that convincingly that this is what you're meant to be doing. Yeah. And we were talking about being weird. And I think that there is I think, you know, once you get into business and like the business sides of things, sure, there is a level of like you have to be likable in a way,
Mm.
but you really only have to be likable to your audience,
Mhm.
you know,
That's
and
right.
then, but nobody else matters, you know, like we were talking about Wim Hof. Do you know who Wim Hof
Oh
is?
yeah.
Yeah.
I've sat in a lot of ice baths now.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That guy is like he's the weirdest version of himself.
So
Like
he's completely off his rocker.
he's completely
Yeah.
embracing the weird. And
Yeah.
even people who like subscribe to his stuff are like, this guy's weird, but you love him. Like he becomes endearing. And
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, that's just kooky Wim Hof,
Yeah.
you know? And so
Yeah.
it's like, I feel like he's a good example
That's
of
really
like
good.
somebody who's just full on living their best life like in the way that they know how.
Well, and I love watching people, especially with the internet, like the way that a niche, if that's how you say that word, if the way that a niche thing can blow up. There's a podcast about pens, like writing utensils, and it's huge.
Hey, illustrators love pens,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's like, yeah, it's a whole show dedicated to, or like, which by the way, the mistake of the work ethic is it's like, that's broad. It's not niche. It's not like, it's not like, oh, there's a whole like cult of people that are like, this is what they're thinking about. Whereas like a buddy of mine started like a Dungeons and Dragons podcast. And in my mind, I'm like, I actually remember thinking,
oh, that's a massive community though.
I would never want to listen to that. And I think it's going to be hugely successful.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, everyone wants to, it's a massive community, right? You like, once you, and it's like, you can find something you love.
An arts and environment podcast. That's going to be my next thing.
I love it. Well, you should definitely do that. So you got that nice mic there. I don't know where you got that, but you're all set up.
I'm all set up.
Drop, you got the mic.
For my future podcast career.
I love it. When's that launching? Next month.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So stay tuned for the Arts and Environment podcast with Sarah Page, debuting in March of 2021.
February 32nd.
On February. Yeah. February 32nd. Debuting in March. We're going to be paying attention for that. And I will share a link to it as soon as she's out. She has it out. Stay tuned for that. I'm really looking forward to that. So talk to me about the environment real quick before we start wrapping up. I like what, so we've talked about art. Talk to me about the environment.
Yeah. Well, when you were saying like, you have that duty, that's like, this is like, I feel that way about the environment. Like, I just feel like this is the most important place where I can invest my time. I think if I have impact here, you know, then everything else kind of trickles out of this. So for me, it's like, if we don't have a planet to live on, then like we're all dead. So
it kind of matters. Well,
yeah, none of it matters.
So you work on that, Elon will work on getting us to Mars or whatever planet too. But like,
yeah, like you guys have fun living on Mars, but I want this gorgeous planet where fresh water rains from the sky. Like, that's what I want. Yeah. And I just feel like, when COVID happened and everybody was quarantined, like nature was a real solace for people. People were getting outside more, they were hiking more. And it just really resonate, like the value of nature has never been more important, and the life of nature has never been more at risk. And so I feel like now is the time where we have to do something about it. And
yeah. Well, and I'm sure you saw a lot of like the time lapse of places on Earth when like everyone went into quarantine and like animals started coming out.
Yeah. Like fog, like smog went away in cities and stuff. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting to me, so that was like really fascinating and beautiful to watch, as in, hey, we can actually do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but the other thing, so it's interesting to me, like this whole COVID thing, like it took this pandemic, but like the idea that like, look at how much changed and how fast. Like we all went into our houses, we changed our, people connected with nature, their families, they stopped going to work. We changed the way the world works like that, like overnight. And to me, I'm like, oh, look at what our collective will is capable of. If we, like you had said, if we say, we want a world that works this way, and we decide and commit to make it work that way, it can happen really fast.
Yeah.
And we just saw ourselves do it.
Yeah.
And then when I hear people say like, well, let's just get back to normal, which now it's been long enough that like, I don't hear that as much anymore. Like, I think this is just the way it is. But like, would we really want that? Right? Like, didn't we learn and grow through this that we can like see like, hey, maybe time with the family is good. Maybe working from home's not a bad idea. Maybe riding a bicycle or being in nature is healthy.
Yeah, there's a book called The Conundrum that talks about how efficiency is the enemy of the planet, and it's kind of this tough place where we want to make progress, but the more progress we make, the more toxic it is to the planet and to people. And so we have to figure out how to balance our like drive for progress and our true need to like be healthy, like be healthy people and healthy planet. So I think that there's obviously technology out there. There are corporations who are tackling this problem, but there are ways of being efficient and there are ways of being productive that don't have to be toxic. And I think we just have to switch over to those things, and people have to be willing to change their behaviors for a little while. In order to do that, you got to get uncomfortable for a little bit and relearn a new way of doing things. And then I think it'll be able to reset itself. But here's the thing. We're not saving the planet. The planet is going to save itself. The planet is going to maintain a constant state of homeostasis, but it may wipe out humans in order to do that. So my drive to like save the planet is really to save people, like so we don't go extinct, because that's ultimately what's going to happen. Planet Earth is going to be fine. She's going to keep rocking and doing her thing throughout the universe. But humans just may not be a part of that process.
That reminds me of an old George Carlin comedy skit where he talked about the audacity of saying save the planet. And he's like, the earth will shake you off like a surface nuisance.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, and in the end, perhaps, you know, we're all worried about plastic. Maybe the earth just wanted plastic and brought us along into existence so it could be the earth plus plastic minus you humans again.
Minus humans.
Like, okay, you served your purpose. I have plastic. Be gone with you or whatever. But like, it's right. Like the earth is going to be just fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. But it'd be nice if we could.
Yeah, the earth doesn't care what temperature it is, you know.
Right.
Animals do, you know. I think it's animals and people. You know, if we're trying to save animals and people, then we need to sweep up around here. It's getting a little messy. Yeah, we gotta clean up.
How do you see art playing a role in that work?
Oh, that's the ultimate question. Yeah, I mean, it can play a number of roles. I mean, you see any documentary that you watch on it is technically art, but if you're talking about like my kind of art, like, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. Recently, I just learned about these sculptures that they're dumping in the ocean to build artificial reefs, and so I would love to get involved with that. So step number one is to learn sculpture.
Okay.
Which is not what I currently do. But I mean, as far as like graphic design goes or painting murals goes, there's a mural organization out there called Pangea Seed. And they, their whole thing is Artists for Oceans. And so they do murals all over the world that are purely about protecting the planet and oceans. And their whole thing is protecting the oceans and how beneficial the oceans are for us and cleaning up plastics. And you know, so they have a lot of activism that's involved with supporting the artists that paint the murals for awareness. So that's definitely a bucket list thing, would be to paint a mural with Pangea Seed.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's also just supporting organizations who are already out there doing it, and seeing how you can contribute in some way as an artist, whether it's, you know, designing their marketing materials or contributing in other ways. But I definitely want to get more involved with environmental organizations and devote my talents in that space. I'm not there yet, but I want to start moving in that direction. I'm going to start talking about myself in that way so that people start recognizing me as that type of artist.
So if someone's listening that maybe is in one of those industries, like as you're talking about this, I'm like, I could think of 3 different people I've interviewed that aren't artists, but are really concerned with particularly like the ocean and plastic like that. As you were like talking through that, I'm like, oh, I can rattle off some people. One's an endurance athlete, swimmer, connected to the ocean and ocean communities and travels the world talking to ocean communities about their relationship with the ocean. You know, one of them's a little more like politically minded and like the political good God. You know what I'm
Activism.
There you go. And as I'm talking through, so if someone's listening, it was like, you know what, we actually need artists. Like, so you're open to gigs. You want like, can they get in touch with you? Should they use your Instagram? I think that's the only thing you've shared so far about how someone can.
Yeah, they can go to my website, www.sarahpageart.com, and I have a contact form on there that goes right to my email. You can also email me if you want, sarah@sarahpageart.com.
Awesome.
And follow me at Sarah Page Art. So I'm here to collaborate specifically on environmental causes. Yeah,
I love it. And I think you're right. You frame yourself that way, you'll start saying yes to the kind of work that's gonna lead you to that and really kind of play a role in that. And maybe, and I know like even sitting here looking, I don't know if you did that world behind you, but it's
no, this is a decal.
It's super cool. But it, like, as you're talking about, I'm like, yeah, this is it's like art inspires, it casts vision, right? It's like there is a way in which we can help. You know, it's weird, this wasn't art, but like I've visited other communities that had done, like we were doing like community gardening stuff, and then I went to communities that had been doing it for 30 years, and I saw what was possible over 30 years. And it made vision easy, because then I came back and I was like, oh, well, we're a couple years in. Do you guys know what this could look like in 30 years of kind of a long obedience in one direction? And in some sense, I think art does that for people in ways that helps us see things that we can't see, that we don't see in front of us, right? Is there anything I should be asking you? Is there anything that we'll have missed if we wrap up without talking to you about?
Oh, I'm sure I'll discover it, hours later when I'm taking a shower or something. Yeah. No, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. So
I really, man, I love talking to you, and I'm sure, right now I'm just going to say it because it's an idea in my head as I'm thinking of these other people. I may at some point try to reach out to see if we can do, I'm like, I just think it'd be interesting to take a bunch of, like, a handful of people that I'm thinking of that have been on the show that really care about the environment and some of these things, but you're like an artist, one's an athlete, one's a, more like, one's more theologian, one's more, it's like, and like get them on one show and go like, just, hey, I got, go.
Yeah.
This doesn't, to do like just an extra, like a bonus episode. So that would be for that. Totally. I just think it'd be really interesting, because I always feel like I'm with you, but I don't feel like this isn't a sweet spot for me conversationally. And I would learn a lot from doing that. And I think it would be really good for me to give, and probably each of those people wish they could have spent more time talking about exactly that thing that there's a fire burning in them about.
Yeah.
And perhaps we could set up a show for that.
I would love to do that. And
then you could take a copy of it and put it on your art and in your environment and art show. Is that what you called it? Do we need a name?
Art. Yeah, we need to come up with a name. We need to have people write in with their ideas for the title of my podcast.
You know what? Here we go. This is perfect.
Arts and environment.
So if you're listening right now, if you go to the workethicpodcast.com, it's just a link tree. And at the top of the link tree, there is a link that says join the conversation. And if you hit that link, you can just talk to it like on your phone or your computer. You can just, so I've often said at the end of the show, like go there and answer, what do you think success is, or what stood out to you? But for this, like we need a name for Sarah's show because it's coming out next month. So we seriously need your ideas and your creativity right now. So we're gonna crowdsource this. Go to that, hit the link tree, and just leave a message. And actually, if you do it soon enough, some of those could even get included at the end of this show, but you got to do it quick.
Ooh, got to do it quick.
Well, actually, that's impossible because I have to launch it for you to hear it. But I can circle back and add it later. You have to have heard
give
this
you a
show.
shout out on the next show.
On the next episode, we can share those on there and perhaps even have Sarah chime in on the one that she settled on. Hopefully it's your idea.
Oh yeah.
Maybe
if you win, you can be my first guest.
Boom. Perhaps hopefully it's not someone boring and dull.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
don't be boring.
Unless you're boring. Interesting and not boring and you have good ideas, Sarah would like
super
to
weird.
Send them in and then come be weird with her in the dark.
This is great. I'm actually gonna have to do this now. How many people have like started podcasts off of your podcast?
I don't know, but I try to encourage everyone because I think it's a really good idea. And by the way,
how long have you been doing it now?
Year and a half, maybe.
Okay.
And it's a great way to get meetings that you wouldn't otherwise get. So like I reached out to an author of a book that I'm in love with. I've done 2 episodes with him. Both of them are like 3 hours long. And I'm like, how on earth do I get to talk to the most brilliant man I've ever, like I read a book that I go, this is the most important book I ever read. I reached out and I was like, do you want to be on the show? And you know, it's really good. Like I've gotten meetings with people that would not give me their time, but it's like, but no one's asking them to be on a podcast. It's a kind of a cool thing to do. It puts something down.
Yeah.
It's helpful for their own promotion to kind of get introduced to another audience. I just think you absolutely should be doing a podcast and your business will grow, right? Sarah Page Art will grow because you're bringing artists and environmentalists to a table to have conversation. And that's how you're actually going to pave your way because you're going to start with your podcast. Like it's going to work. So we need a name. So guys, if you want to be part of this, seriously, send it in.
Yeah, you'll have to send me your top tricks and tips to my email.
Tips and tricks. Yeah. Well,
don't send me ticks.
It's start doing it. Just like your advice was literally to anyone else. Like if you're on the fence on something, start doing it. And yeah, you just start recording a conversation. I mean, we're just on a Zoom call and I hit record. Yeah. It's that easy. Right.
Yeah.
And so, man, I'm super excited for this. This is great. There's a lot. I think there's a lot. I can't wait to, by the way, I'm going to give my suggestion for a name.
Okay.
It isn't obviously related to either topic.
Okay.
But Weird in the Dark.
That's it. I think that's it. I think Weird in the Dark.
Getting Weird in the Dark is your place for everything, environment and art. And I don't know how the name ties in, but you'll figure that out. Just massage that a little bit, but Getting Weird in the Dark. I like
Getting Weird in the Dark. Yeah, people will have no idea what this podcast is about. And they'll be like, it's about arts and environment. Okay.
Well, so I usually will, like, when I launch the podcast, will put out like a little clip and a little preview, and then it'll be the person's name and then 3 things. Like, as I talk to you, like things and I'll listen to it again before I launch it. And I'll be like, you know what really stood out to me? And it'll be like, I don't know, commitment, creativity, and then I think I need
and
to
then
be
getting in the dark.
I get
that's gonna be the clickbait for sure.
It's gonna have to make its way in.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's part of your story too. You helped inspire that. So
what's that?
The dark part. Yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was part of your dream.
Because of my dream.
Yeah.
That came out of this show. And the other thing, how about that? And then someone will actually listen to the work ethic because your show's gonna be so popular. And you're gonna go, you know where this came from? Actually, I was on the work ethic, and then people will finally tune in.
Oh man.
Which, by the way, I will say, people listening to it, and I'm not.
If you're still listening.
Oh, they're for sure listening. You're delightful. So, but here's the thing is, I don't care. Like the whole, like, I don't care what you think, but I like genuinely, I'm like, well, I'm actually doing something like field research. I want to know like what work is and what it means. And I'm learning, like, each of these shows touches on things about sacrifice and creativity and flow state and whatever. And for me, it's like, I'm doing this for me.
Yeah.
Even the work I do with the homeless, it's like, it's kind of selfish. Like, I want their perspective. I want their wisdom. I want their vantage point, and I bring them a sandwich or whatever. And I want to be friends, and it's reciprocally valuable, but like, it's for me. Like, I need it. I need those people in my life. And I needed this platform, right? Like, I needed to do this for myself, for my own development, to scratch my own itch. And then a couple people tune in, and there is a few people that love it, that are like, this is exactly, and they just happen to have a similar itch, but it's not like a ton of people. Right. And I'm like, that's almost irrelevant.
Fine.
People will be like, how many people listen? The only reason that it would be great if more people listen is for the sake of people like you and people that come on the show, that I would really love to be able to send business their way, to send partners their way.
It'll come.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for spending all this time with me. It's so good to connect with you again. And so hopefully you and I can make a better habit of keeping up, but I'll be stalking you on Instagram either way. So it's good.
All right.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Peace, y'all.